Welcome to Enigma Day. I'm delighted to welcome in Seattle Sandra Layman. Sandra, do you have a melody for us?
I do. This has the exciting title of number 23, and it's a Tish-Nignim, short and sweet. And according to the information that Ilana kindly sent me, and thank you so much for having me here in this amazing project, there is no information available about this tune. So there we are, number 23.
What more do you need to know? What more can we say? It's great. It sounds like the sort that you could play around a few times and we could enjoy it more each time.
Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting about there are metronome markings for all of these nigunim, and sometimes they seem appropriate and sometimes they seem really off. So that's another whole issue that we could get into more. But anyway, yes. So I believe we have our special guest here. I would love to welcome Martin Schwartz, who is a very influential person in my early development as a klezmer fiddler. He and I met in 1978 in Berkeley. And maybe, Martin, you can tell us a little bit about how you got into collecting your amazing assortment of 78 RPMs of, well, Jewish music and also Greek music.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, let me thank you, Sandra, for having me as guest, and Ilana for this really fantastic project. So glad to be here. Well, I grew up in a home where I heard Yiddish singing from my mother in folk style. When I say folk style, that's pretty important because there is now almost disappeared style of ornamentation of voice, a lot that goes with the Yiddish singing apart from the tunes themselves. It's what you do with the tunes. Now, my mother was a great singer in the Yiddish folk style. And so I heard Yiddish music. That was the first influence that I had in all of this. And then in Berkeley, after I came back from New York in 1970, I had a wave of interest in things Jewish, including at that time religious things. And there was a lot of also nostalgia. Furthermore, I had, for a very long time, an interest in Greek music and perceived all kinds of relationships between Yiddish klezmer and certain genres of Greek music. And I knew a certain amount of modern Greek already. And so that too became part of my pursuit, both aesthetic and scholarly in the sense of comparative research. And so I began collecting records, being a crazy record collector. It can be an obsessive pursuit. I'm cured by now, but I was quite obsessed with it once upon a time. I should say, speaking of academic, I'm not trained musically, formally. I have what's called a good ear. But my academic training is in ancient languages, history of ancient languages and religions. So really, that's where I am. That's what I do best in the world. But this activity of collecting and analyzing this music became a major distraction from the rest. Anyway, so I began wherever I could, secondhand stores, people who had old records in their attics, things people would give me. I began collecting. Actually, I had a few 78s from way back and found them fascinating, both Jewish and Greek. Klezmer, actually, a few, and some Greek records that I got cheaply in New York when 78s were being sold in the Greek stores because of the change of technology. They were getting rid of them. So a lot of this is like the history of somebody else. You'd think I'm talking about my history, but a lot of it is reconstructed in my memory. And these things are not always absolutely reliable. Memory is not reliable. One, over the years, makes up scenarios, but whether the sequencing is accurate in all cases, I don't know. But I did find myself collecting these records and sharing them. So I got to know the Berkeley Klezmorim, Lev Lieberman, David Gray, those folks.
Yeah, I wanted to hear about that. So it's my understanding that around 1973 is when you started hanging around with Lev Lieberman, who was the founder of the Klezmorim, the first klezmer revival band, who came out with their first record in 1977. And that's how I got into klezmer, was that way, and saw your name on their record cover. And then I met you a few months after that. But I was hoping maybe you could speak a little bit about that very early start of the musicians actively playing this music and being influenced and inspired by your collection and your knowledge.
Yeah, so about 73 I think of as a historic summer, where not only Lev Lieberman and David Julian Gray, the clarinetist, were around. Stu Brotman, let's not forget the great Stu Brotman, still great Stu Brotman. And a certain summer, Henry Saposnik was also in town. And somehow we had the idea that we were starting something new. For my part, with the supplying the material and the old records, singing a little, I would every now and then try to tell them how to phrase something. And I'm informed about phrasing from my experience with Yiddish singing, my mother. And gradually more and more people came to my place and I played them records. I see Delilah Lewis is here. Delilah, are you there? Thought I saw her. Yeah, there you are. Hi, Delilah. Is that Delilah? Anyway, she recorded many of the things that I had. Yeah, I remember how many things of mine you recorded in those days.
Oh, many of us.
I got to know quite a number of wonderful people through that activity. I have some notes, but I may not use them.
I know you have to go soon, Marty, but it's just a thrill to have you here and hear a little bit about.
I have
Pardon?
3 minutes. If you have anything more to ask, I can.
Well, a couple of minutes, and then we'll get back to the Beregovski, but I'd love to hear more.
Do you have any specific questions?
Well, maybe you remember, so I was also corresponding with Lev Lieberman. He couldn't be here today, but and he has a website up, klezmo.com. So anybody who's interested in the very early history of the Klezmer revival, which actually seems to have started on the West Coast, and then Andy Statman and Zev Feldman were also beginning to play together in New York. Pardon?
We think it started here.
Well, that's my impression. Yeah. So anyway, anybody who's interested can look up Lev's site, klezmo.com. Anyway, yeah, tell us a little bit more, and then we'll get back to.
Yeah, I mean, I want to mention such people also as part of a second wave of people who came to my place, Michael Alpert and the people from Brave Old World, which again included Stu Brotman, Joel Rubin, and Joshua Horowitz, very important person I met in those early days. And so many people I could mention, many of them violinists who I know through either directly or through people who came. Daniel Hoffman, I see, is on the project. Sandra, of course, yourself. Jeff Wallach, so many. And I'm just mentioning violinists. There were some interesting intermediary people who aren't violinists, but who were important too, such as Jeanette Levitsky, and gosh, so many others. So
I have one last question, if I may, and I'm curious because this was an interest of mine, of the intersection between Greek music, especially Greek Asia Minor music, and klezmer music. That's how those two interests are how I met you. So tell us a little. I mean, I know that you could tell us much about that, and other Romanian music perhaps, but just a little bit about Greek and Jewish music.
So this is now how I became involved in that personally. I had been going to Greek nightclubs in New York, bouzouki places mainly, and there were also Asia Minor style places in New York in the early 60s, circa 1960. And before that, I was impressed. I remember hearing one record in a store in LP, I think it was Kostas Gardini, said that how much like klezmer music, I didn't call it klezmer then, but Jewish wedding music and whatnot, the stuff sounded like. And also in the nightclubs, modally and to some extent melodically, the material very much reminded me of Yiddish music. I liked this Greek music on its own aesthetically. So I began systematically to collect examples of related tunes so that I could hum or even in some instances sing quite a number of songs in both languages. And the influence is two-way. In Moldavia, for example, which was part of the Ottoman Empire, there were guilds, unions, as it were, of musicians who were inter-ethnic under the Ottoman Empire. So Jews, ethnic Greeks who were very important historically, politically in Moldavia. Some Armenians, of course, Romanian and some Ukrainian musicians, some of them gypsies. So these people shared tunes, and there is a certain influence of Greek music that way in the Klezmer and Yiddish repertory. Songs that are quite familiar, ultimately, I think, have this Greek origin, like so forth. There's a Greek prototype for that, and so forth. That's a whole genre of Greek influence on the klezmer. And then in Odessa and in Constantinople, where there was a large Ashkenazi community, and a number of other points where there were connections of the Greek and the Jewish communities, a lot of Yiddish tunes got to influence the Greek repertory. I think especially in Odessa, where it was a large Jewish musical presence. Of course, the violin we know about in Odessa, and also a Greek musical presence and the underworlds of both, criminal stratum of Greeks and another criminal stratum of Jews, which have something to do with the genre that we're talking about. So that's perhaps a longer answer than you expected, but it would start that way.
Thank you so much, Marty. It's been an honor and the delight to have you here as part of my session. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. My pleasure. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So, should I continue now? Can you hear me?
Absolutely, please do. And if I could encourage everybody, if they have questions for Sandra, there's a chat button at the bottom, or if they want to make observations or they have reminiscences of their own, possibly short ones, they could also interject a little.
Feel free to ask. I may not answer, but okay. So this is, I'm going to play two related nigunim. One is number 74. Just called Nign, and then there's 74A, also called Nign. The metronome markings for these two are quite different. First one is slower, but it also has a change of, actually a couple of changes of meter, of time signature in the middle, and also a change of key from minor to major and back again. And then the second one is, you can tell it it's a related tune, but it's faster.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Yankl Falk is asking, what number is this? Can you tell us the number again, Sandra?
Yes, those were 74 and 74A, and they're both called just simply Niggun. Okay, so any questions? Okay, Yankl, where is it? It's okay. These are from Yankl. So my friend Yankl is here. Wonderful klezmer clarinetist and Yiddish singer, beautiful. And we go back together almost 40 years. Yep. So it's not in the Beregovski book, or maybe it is. I have not looked to see. It's not in a published book. Ilana, actually, maybe you can tell us more where all of these Nigunim. So each fiddler that's in this project was sent several Nigunim, handwritten transcriptions by Beregovski, and so I lucked out to have the music that I have. It's looks like this kind of thing. So it's volume number 4, according to what I understand, which is vocal Nigunim transcriptions of very old recordings. I had no access to any recordings that might have been done of the ones that I'm playing now. Ilana, I don't know if you want to add to this.
Yeah, so for the people who don't know, Beregovski in his lifetime compiled 5 books, 5 volumes of Jewish folk music, which he intended to publish, but because of the political circumstances and other things, he never managed to publish more than a few articles. And so one was songs, like Yiddish folk songs, including songs of work, love songs, protest songs, that sort of thing. One was instrumental music, which of course is of great interest to us. And there have been various editions of that book, most recently in 2015, compiled by edited by Kurt Bjorling, a version of an earlier Mark Slobin, Michael Alpert version. And there is this book, volume 4, the Tish-Nigunim, and it's in 2 halves. The first 158 melodies are not for dancing, Beregovski says, and the second lot, which is about another 100, are for dancing. So what I did was literally divide up randomly the 158 between the 35 participants, because there's only been one publication of this volume, I think, and it was in Russia. It was a Russian language version in around about 1999. Most people don't have access to it. I've just seen a dark web version. And so I'd ordered up all 5 volumes as PDFs on CDs from the archive in Kiev, where the sheet music is, and the wax cylinders that were made in the field, any that there are. And some of those have been digitalized and are online, and others haven't. And there's information about that on my website on the strings page that I put up earlier, and I'll put up again. So it's not readily accessible, and that was one bit. And the other bit was that if you give 35 violinists a book of 158 tunes, A, it'll take them a year to get through it, even if they're in lockdown and have got nothing else to do, because they have to try every tune and see whether they like it. And B, they'll all want to play the same tunes. So my idea was give them each between 1 and 5 tunes and ask them to get to grips with them. And if they really hated them, they could give them back. But most people managed to find something in 2 or 3 tunes and then ask for another couple. So that's kind of the history.
Well, I got an excess of riches then, because I got 6.5, and I'm saying 6.5 because 74 and 74A, I guess that's 1.5. I don't know. Anyway, so I was thinking that maybe I would play another kind of Tish-Nignim, but this one isn't from Beregovski's collection. I learned it from a field recording that was made in Romania, in the area of Transylvania, northwest Romania. Let's see, it would be about almost something like 50 years ago. And these were Roma musicians playing in the style that they remembered having played with Jewish musicians in. And it's a lovely Tish-Nignim. So here we go.
turn yourself down a tiny bit, Sandra? I think there's a bit of distortion coming in sometimes.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
I
It
don't know
might
how
not
to
be
control.
anything to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to control the volume on Zoom. That's really interesting. Wow. Um, should I turn
I don't
off
know if you can
original?
just turn down the computer. No, no, no.
Okay.
Anyway, I've got a question. You could maybe turn
Maybe
it a
I
bit
should
further
sit
back.
back. I'll sit back.
A little tiny bit. My question is, you went to Romania, is that right? And collected this tune, or you?
Actually, let's see. I had okay. The first time I went to Romania was in summer of 1979, and I was in Greece at the time. It's a long story. Within the space of
Shall I
about a
ask
year.
my question then?
Yeah. Okay. So Romania. Uh, then I came back after a few months in Greece and Romania, and I started grad school in ethnomusicology at the University of Washington. And the professor there was very interested in Romanian, and he had collected this field recording. I don't think he made the field recording, but he had brought it back.
Okay,
So
so my question is actually, it's not really about that. My question is, did you notice substantial differences between when Romanian musicians played music that they identified as being Jewish, as opposed to music that they identified as being Romanian?
wow, I'll have to think about that. I haven't heard very much music of Romanian musicians playing what they thought was Jewish music. I've heard Romanians play, I mean, yes, Romanian Jewish musicians playing some Jewish music. There are a couple of CDs that an ethnomusicologist in Romania named Speranța Rădulescu has brought out on her Ethnophonie label. So, for example, I've never heard that Tish-Nign played by anybody else except on this one field recording. So there are versions of the same tune played, you've heard them, recordings of various, like, let's say, jock tunes, or jock tunes, or slow hora tunes, that are played with somewhat different ornamentation, in the Yiddish and the Romanian. So there's a lot of what some people call vibrato trills. So it's kind of in between vibrato and a trill. It's a very close, it's sort of like the upper finger piggybacks on the lower one, kind of thing. And that's very typically Romanian. There's a couple of other ones. So the Cravitz is not very typically Romanian. It would be, that's very Jewish. So, that's a good question, and I could go on for a little while. So the flavor, the tom, is going to be different. But some of the tunes are very similar or the same. Not a lot, but I guess probably especially Moldavian ones.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a question here, but I'm just going to ask a follow-up, if I may, just before I address Daniel's question, which is that, it is a question that a lot of people are trying to address at the moment, or it's a matter of some discussion in the community, whether musicians, because Jewish musicians, when they lived somewhere, played much more like the local musicians, and they would have had much more of the local style. Is that your impression, or from those earlier times than now, let's say? Obviously we have no really basis because anymore, but
I think Marty Schwartz is still here. He could probably talk a lot more about that, but than I could. But so when I was in Romania, first of all, I was there under the most repressive, toughest last years of Ceausescu, the dictator. So my timing in life has not been the greatest sometimes. So I could not circulate and go out in the field and try to look up any old Jewish musicians that might have still been there. I think there were very few Jews at all, and musicians, I didn't have access to those. So my personal experience, it's hard to know, because by then, by Well, I went back to Romania for several years, starting in December of 1985. And then I last left a few months after the so-called revolution in April of 90. And that's right when Romania started opening up. So musicians who went there after I left had a very different experience than I did. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question actually, but from recordings, I mean, this whole intersection of Romanian Greek and Klezmer in particular interests me, and some of the tunes are shared. And you know, I mean, the same question could actually be asked about Roma musicians too, because in Spain it's flamenco. In Romania, it's musica lăutărească. And so, I wouldn't be able to answer adequately at all. But it's a great question.
Thank you very much. I wonder, actually, Daniel Karkner's got a question. Do you want to unmute yourself, Daniel, and ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, Daniel. Yeah, nice to see you. And nice to meet you finally.
Yeah. It wasn't really a question. I just wanted to see if it's the Sulețianu, the ethnomusicologist, the recording that you played from. She recorded some Roma musicians playing Jewish tunes in the 70s. Is that the one that you played from? I was just curious, or if you remember.
I apologize. I don't have the information about who actually made that recording, field recording, or who did the recording.
Okay, that's fine. Just curious. Yeah.
If I find that out, I'll let you know.
Sure.
You had a point, Daniel, about the Jewish and the non-Jewish pieces sounding very different with the same band, which I guess was one of the questions I was asking, if it was.
But now, one thing I learned from Marty actually was that in let's say around 1920, I'm just approximately, there were, for example, clarinet recordings put out in New York. The same recording, one with a Greek label slapped on it and one with a Yiddish label slapped on it. So sometimes the same recording would be appealing to one ethnic group and then the other ethnic group. So.
Thank you. Does anybody have any more questions, or should we ask Sandra to play us? Oh, Marty's.
Marty, can you unmute Marty?
That piece you were playing, which some people were curious to know where it was from. I think there was an ethnographer, not a musicologist, named Lawrence, maybe Steinberg, a name like that, Lawrence someone. He may have written about the Jews of Transylvania, who I think actually made those recordings. And not being an ethnomusicologist, he didn't take his recordings seriously, but I think that's where that piece you played came from. And it's, I think, there's a copy of it in Yvel. I don't know what you mentioned. You alluded to Robert Garfius. I don't think he collected it. Let me hear what you're saying now.
Sorry, yeah, I was muted. He was the one whose Romanian music class I took at UW, and so that's where I got the recording from. But my understanding is he had just come back from Romania with it, but he didn't record it. So somewhere in an ancient box or something, I may have the information from him at the time, but I wish I could tell you more. Were you thinking of Lawrence Saltzman? Was it Saltzman? Is that the name that you were thinking of, Marty? Oh, you're muted, I think.
It could be Saltzman. Lawrence is definitely the first name. But I'm not sure about that. Saltzman is possible.
Yeah,
Its name Jewish.
Yankl, did you want to ask something or say something?
Yeah. This was part of a medley of tunes that Bob Cohen brought in when we were doing some recording with Naya Capella. We did not release that one. We didn't quite. We couldn't get that one right. But it was. I think it was the first of a set of 5 tunes. And I know it's on a. It's on a field recording, a reissue that I've got downstairs on CD. But like, it's not the one famous Primates of Transylvania, which is a wonderful album. Somebody
You're muted.
Okay, did I say anything at all?
Yeah, you did. It was just the last few words.
Okay,
Primates of Transylvania, and that did it. That broke the internet.
That's enough. Yeah, that's enough.
Wow, we have great people on here. Okay, thanks, Yankl. And by the way, I had the delight of playing just a few months ago well, it seems like forever ago now, actually, since the world has changed so much, but playing with Yankl and Christina Crowder and Charles Casimiro and at a little gig, Klezmer gig in Portland, the beginning of November. That was the first time I'd played in a long time. And we were hoping to do more, and look what happened. So anyway, should I wrap up with one more Beregovski?
If we don't have any, I think we could sit here all night and exchange stories and stuff, but if you could do that, I think that would be amazing. If you want to sit back a little further, that would be fantastic also.
Okay, let's see, I got the screen here, so, all right. So this is a cheerful little number, and I'll be recording the other ones that I don't play today. I might record them actually in different keys from the way they were transcribed. They were all transcribed in G or G minor. But anyway, so this is a Tish-Nign number 40.
Oh, is that it?
I mean, I could go on, but yeah, I mean, that I'm sure went on for quite a while.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Beregovski does talk about the melodies, some of the Nigunim being melodies that they got from the Klezmorim, and Monica's just said, yes, she knows the second part of that. Yeah,
I mean, it feels like, wait a minute, that's generic. I mean, that happens every other tune or something. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting that way. But it's interesting that one is not marked as a Freglachs. It says Tish-Nign, but I think that they were, having a pounding good time with this one.
Absolutely. Oh, Sandra, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing your interesting friends with you, all the people we look to for our history and who we owe so much for the providing the materials that we learnt so much from.
May I say just one more thing about how I got into this whole thing? And that is at the beginning of 1977, you see, this is ancient history. I was here in Seattle. I didn't grow up here, but I had moved out here. And I bumped into somebody on the bus who said, there are these 3 Romanian gypsy musicians in the ethnomusicology program right now as visiting artists. First of all, I'd never heard of ethnomusicology, but second of all, I knew I had to go there immediately. I dropped whatever it was I was on the bus for, went there, and started hanging out with these guys. 2 of them started playing in a Greek nightclub, so Greek music happened almost right away. Now, I had been interested in this stuff before, but then... So I happened to hear a couple of, a record of that had a couple of numbers of Greek violin music from Asia Minor. And I just had this idea, I hadn't known that there was violin in Greek music at all. I thought it was all bouzoukia, which I liked. But and then I saw the first Klezmer album, which came out in 1977, bought that. I was very curious because it had some Romanian music on it, and I was, who are these guys playing Romanian music? Because I had been playing it already. And then the following summer, I went down to the Bay Area for an Arabic music workshop, because meanwhile I'd started playing Arabic music, and starting to get into the Jewish stuff some. And then I went to a Greek record store in I think the Tenderloin of San Francisco at the time, and I thought I would be laughed out of the place, but I thought I'd ask anyway. I said, "You don't by any chance have any Greek music from Asia Minor, do you?" And he didn't laugh me out of the house. He said, "No, we don't, but I know a man who does. And he comes in here fairly often, so why don't you leave your name and number? And when he comes in, I'll have him call you if he likes." So that was Marty Schwartz, and I'd seen his name already on the Klezmer album, acknowledging his role. So you see, I'm circling around to this. So anyway, all within the space of about a year or so, I got into playing a number of the different kinds of Romanian, Greek, Klezmer, also Sephardic. I got into that. I also studied some classical Ottoman, Turkish style on the tambour and a little bit of vocal music. And my background had been classical violin and viola, still is. I teach those. But anyway, I just thought it would be kind of interesting to hear about my original evolution.
It's fascinating. So many of these things end up being kind of lucky coincidences.
Yeah.
Or it's like they're meant to be, because you eventually meet the person who you've heard about 8 times, and then all of a sudden you just meet them in a bar or whatever.
Yeah. Or an amazing place with stacks of incredible treasures of 78s of Greek and Jewish music all over the place. Yeah. Better than a bar.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You got the Saltzman, I got the Lawrence. I'm fairly sure that it was Lawrence Saltzman who recorded that tune.
Okay.
I met the man once long ago and spoke to him about it, and he said, "I didn't even realize the importance of the musical aspect of what I was doing there." He was a photographer, I think, chiefly.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it was Lawrence Saltzman who.
The guy he did.
Did he
Someone
come?
that did the film "The Last Jews of Radowitz."
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that, but he was.
Yes.
Yeah. And did he come out with a book, something like The Lost Jews of the World or something? Because there's a book I have somewhere with photographs from many Jewish communities, or The Lost Worlds of Jewry or something like that. It's a pretty amazing book. Anyway, yeah.
I think we're going to have to set up another panel.
Thank you so much.
It'll be really interesting to have, you guys talking more about what was happening, and maybe even playing some of those early tracks that we still listen to.
Yeah, and maybe finding my notes and refreshing my memory, and that would help too.
Thank you so much again, Sandra. I think maybe we'll end there for today, but think about having another occasion.
Thank you so much. And anybody, go to Ilana's site and find go to the page for this project. There are amazing recordings by wonderful fiddlers from all over the world. Many links, and there's also a link to a donation page. But I mean, you really should check out the world of klezmer fiddling is in good younger hands. So it's an honor. Thank you.
And for us. Thanks, Sandra.